The most desperate cave rescue in history. Red Ridge Cave Rescue. December 21, 1997. A cold evening in Arizona. The 5 young individuals were Brandon, Christopher, and Gus. John, Jeremy, headed together to the Safford Shaft area. This desolate area is also known as Red Hill Canyon. This is no ordinary recreational spot. The surface is riddled with depressions, some reaching depths of 12 to 18 meters. This was once the hard riverbed of an ancient lake. One of the shafts was sealed by a 1.2 meter thick rock. Below lay an accumulation of 18.9 meters of silt. No normal person would ever come to this place. But this was exactly the thrill they were seeking. Around 9 p.m., the 5 individuals carrying gasoline and reckless excitement. Standing on the edge of a steep cliff, their gaze was drawn to a mere 30 centimeters wide crevice in the rock, planning to turn this crevice into a spectacle of shooting flames. Then, without hesitation, they poured for gallons of gasoline into the crack. One of them lit a piece of rag and threw it down, and stepped back a few steps. At first, there was complete silence. Then the explosion shook the earth violently. The ground instantly split apart as flames and debris shot straight into the sky, into a massive gap. The powerful blast sent all 4 of them tumbling to the ground. They were covered in bruises and scrapes, but survived unscathed. Brandon was standing too close. When the explosion occurred, he was peering into the crevice with his head. Beneath his feet suddenly collapsed. He instantly vanished into thin air, into a 12-meter deep pit. The impact of the fall was extremely violent. His legs hit the ground first. With a sickening crack, it snapped on the spot. Then he fell into a deeper crevice. Dirt and rubble poured down. Before he could react, a boulder weighing 3 to 5 tons slid down from above, buried him firmly beneath. He was trapped in an unnatural position with his body contorted, his head tightly pressed against the rock. The broken legs throbbed with pain. The pressure on his abdomen and back intensified. The breath was so agonizing. Dust filled his lungs, choking off any attempt to call for help. On the ground, his friends were screaming his name at the top of their lungs, but received no response. Fear quickly spread among the group. They couldn't see his figure amidst the swirling dust and darkness. They were absolutely powerless to rescue him on their own. In their desperation, they rushed into the car and hurried back to town to seek rescue. Rescuers arrived at the scene within an hour. When they saw the scene, they knew it would be a long and perilous night of rescue. The boulder pressing down on Brandon was not only extremely heavy, was deeply embedded in the soil, almost fused with the earth. The inclined angle of the fissure made the rescue team's task the slightest misstep or any movement could trigger more rocks to tumble down. Meanwhile, Brandon could barely stay conscious. His legs were mangled and bleeding. His body was crushed and deformed. The continuous heavy pressure on his chest made his breathing weak. As the cold gradually drained, symptoms of hypothermia gradually began to appear again. Hours passed. The first major obstacle was that boulder. The rescuers carefully loosened the edges of the boulder. Each strike caused more rubble to fall into the crevice. Every second was fraught with danger. The pulley system has been set up above. The rope was secured to hooks embedded in the surrounding rock walls. It took 6 strong men using all their strength to lift the boulder. Then slowly, inch by inch, they moved it. Finally, with one last effort, the boulder was moved aside. Then the rescuers began digging. They worked methodically to clear away the dirt and rocks. Every movement was slow and cautious to prevent further collapse. Below, Brandon was completely silent. Dust clogged his throat. Even a whisper became impossible. His consciousness hovered on the edge of awareness, wavering between survival and surrender. After hours of arduous rescue efforts, the rescuers finally reached his location. Unbelievably, he was still alive. Under normal circumstances, an average person would likely have perished. Pressure, hypoxia, and injuries are all potentially fatal, but he miraculously maintained faint breathing. The final stage was to bring him back to the surface. The rescuers carefully secured the safety rope secured to his limp body, then secured the fractured legs. They cautiously lifted him bit by bit with extreme care. Ensure that no sudden movements would exacerbate the injuries. Every pull was carefully considered. Every breath was filled with tense anticipation. After nearly 12 hours of agony, Brandon was finally pulled out of the deep pit. His legs were swollen and grotesquely twisted. His face was covered in mud and lifeless. His body was cold, his breathing was weak, and he was rushed to the hospital. Discovered his kidney failure, leg fracture, and severe hypothermia. It's nothing short of a miracle that he survived until now. Boy Scouts cave accident. December 27, 2003. A team consisting of 8 boys and 2 counselors set off for the Boy Scout cave in Florida. The team included 15-year-old Michael Shiro and 16-year-old Javik Henderson. Both of them were very fond of adventure. This cave is renowned for its narrow crawl passages. Although the bends are sharp, but its stable structure was considered safe. Their guide was unable to pass through these passages due to size limitations, so the 2 decided to stay outside. Let the children explore on their own. The air inside the cave was cool, the beams of 9 flashlights flickered in the pitch-black tunnel. The team advanced in the suffocating silence, continued crawling deeper into the cave without hesitation. About an hour later, they arrived at the perilous section known as the hairpin curve. This narrow passage was inclined at a steep angle. Only one person could barely crawl through at a time. Michael was determined to take the lead. Henderson followed closely behind. But when Henderson tried to navigate around this sharp turn, accidentally got stuck in a dilemma with no way forward. As breathing grew rapid, fear began to spread. Realizing Henderson was trapped, Michael was preparing to crawl back to seek help. But when he got his head stuck in the narrow gap, The cave wall scraped against his skin, making movement difficult. The team waiting in the wider part of the cave began to grow anxious. The two struggled for over an hour. Henderson's body twisted painfully in the narrow passage. The sharp rock edges dug deeply into his ribs and hips. Each attempt to move only seemed to make the situation worse. As time passed, the situation became increasingly critical. Michael, cold and exhausted, Henderson was trapped in the darkness, unable to help his friend. His cries for help echoed through the cave, but the other boys were too scared to approach, could only watch in panic, while the counselors outside the cave remained unaware, unfolding inside. Until the boys stumbled back to the cave entrance, explained the situation in panic. The counselors immediately extinguished the lit bonfire and called for rescue. The experienced rescue team quickly arrived with professional tools. The boys were pale, shivering, and huddled together. The rescuers were well aware of the risks of hypothermia and oxygen depletion. Quickly advanced toward the location of Michael and Henderson. When the rescuers reached that sharp turn, the scene was heart-wrenching. Although Henderson was still conscious, but moved slowly with cold, clammy skin. Meanwhile, Michael ahead had collapsed to the ground, lost consciousness. The rescue workers carried out their tasks methodically. They chiseled through the narrow passage to widen the narrow passage. Every strike echoed through the cave, heightened the tension. It took over an hour to rescue Henderson. When he was pulled out from the sharp turn, Henderson burst into tears of relief. Despite his body remaining stiff and trembling uncontrollably, the rescuers wrapped him in a thermal blanket, dragging him through the narrow passage toward the surface. As Henderson was rescued, everyone's attention turned to Michael, who was still unconscious. After 2 hours of arduous effort, using the same method, Michael was rescued. His pulse, though weak, but was still beating. The rescuers carefully secured him to the rescue harness, then painstakingly transported him back to the surface. As soon as they were brought to the surface, rushed forward to provide emergency treatment. Michael, still in a coma, was quickly treated for hypothermia. It took him a full day to regain consciousness, but miraculously survived. The Barrel Roll Rescue, January 1970. 31 explorers gathered together. Everyone was heading to Knox Cave. This cave was notorious for a particularly infamous, known as the Gun Barrel. This is a narrow keyhole-shaped passage, only 45 centimeters wide, yet it stretches a staggering 18.3 meters. Anyone daring to enter must squeeze through this narrow gap. This extremely challenging feat is regarded by many as a symbol test of both physical strength and willpower for the challengers. Also distinguishes ordinary adventurers from those who are truly willing to push their limits. Most people were determined to pass through the gun barrel-like narrow passage, reach the unexplored cave area ahead. They trekked through the snow-covered forest, finally arrived at the cave entrance, a sinkhole covered in ice and snow. Everyone entered the abyss one by one in a line. The atmosphere inside the cave was extremely terrifying. Only the sound of dripping water and the friction of boots against the rocks. There were 19 people in the team who decided to take on the challenge, including the 14-year-old Peter. This was Peter's first cave exploration, eager to prove himself. He watched as the others slowly entered the narrow passage. Some moved swiftly, confident in their abilities, while others hesitated and moved cautiously. When it was Peter's turn, he took a deep breath and plunged in headfirst. The tunnel was narrower than he had imagined. As he wriggled forward, his body kept scraping against the surrounding rock walls. Could only move inch by inch using his elbows and knees. The thin air inside the cave made his breathing become rapid. Every few centimeters he had to stop to catch his breath. The immense weight of the rocks pressed down on him. Disaster struck just 2.4 meters away from the exit. As Peter pushed forward, his knee slipped into a narrow crevice in the ground. At first he thought it was just a minor inconvenience, but when he tried to pull his knee out, but got stuck and couldn't move, a sense of fear instantly surged through him, frantically twisting and pulling. But every struggle made the situation worse. His knees were firmly stuck in the rocks, completely trapped in the rock crevice. Peter shouted loudly, his voice trembling with fear. But the crowd ahead continued crawling forward, completely oblivious to his predicament, until they gradually realized something was wrong. When they turned around, they discovered Peter was stuck, blocked the narrow passage. This left everyone trapped with no way out. The rescue team tried various methods to free Peter, pulling hard on his leg, or twisting his body to constantly adjust his position. But every attempt was in vain. Every tug made him scream in pain. In the end, they had no choice but to stop. Narrow passage. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The temperature continued to drop. Hypothermia became a real threat. The cave explorers huddled together for warmth, both fearful and exhausted. Outside the cave, the other team members began to feel anxious, noticing that the others hadn't returned yet. One of them ventured into the cave to check the situation. When he arrived at the barrel passage, was shocked to find Peter stuck, and the entire team inside was also trapped behind him. He hurried back to the surface to sound the alarm. In the evening, the police and firefighters arrived at the scene. Everyone quickly realized this was no ordinary cave. The passage was extremely narrow. The barrel-shaped passage made it impossible to pull Peter out directly. Any sudden movement could cause serious injury. Time passed minute by minute, but the rescue made no progress. At one point, Peter hallucinated due to fear and exhaustion, started screaming that snakes were biting him. As night fell, the situation became increasingly dangerous. The temperature inside the cave had dropped to a dangerous level. If Peter cannot be rescued soon, the cold will strike all the trapped individuals. Finally, around 8:30 in the evening, after hours of struggle, The rescuers devised a new plan. They handed the trapped person a thermos of soapy water, hoping it would serve as a lubricant. Soon, Peter's knee was freed from the rock crevice. The firefighters carefully poured the soapy water around his legs, while securing a rope around his ankle. With the cooperation of everyone, they carefully pulled Peter's leg. The people inside the cave moved their bodies beside him to reduce the pressure on his knees. With slow and steady movement at the knee and one final gentle pull, his leg was finally freed. The rescue team breathed a sigh of relief. But the rescue mission was not over yet. They had to make sure Peter wouldn't slip back into the crevice again. Everyone proceeded with extreme caution, guide him through the remaining section of the narrow passage until he finally climbed out to the surface. The others behind also climbed back to safety one by one, although everyone was exhausted. But fortunately, everyone was safe. Peter suffered multiple fractures and bruises and received treatment for hypothermia. After several days of hospitalization and rest, he basically recovered.